If you grew up in the late 90s or early 2000s, Steve Stifler wasn't just a character in American Pie. He was an archetype, the Stiffmeister, the engine of chaos. He was the guy who made things happen. While the protagonist, Jim, was anxious and clumsy, Stifler was pure, unfiltered impulse. He was loud, he was obnoxious, and he was absolutely essential to the ecosystem of youth. At 18, Stifler is a king. His behavior, the insults, the excessive drinking, the performative dominance, is currency. In the high school cafeteria or the college frat house, being the loudest person in the room is often mistaken for being the most important. We laughed at him, sure, but we also leaned on him. Every social circle has a Stifler. He's the one who turns a boring Tuesday into a story you tell for 10 years. He represents a specific kind of freedom, the freedom from consequences. At 18, consequences are abstract. The future is a distant country. Stifler lives in the eternal now, and there is something magnetic about that. We admire his refusal to be serious because, at that age, seriousness feels like a trap. But movies end. Credits roll. The audience goes home. The character, however, remains frozen in that summer after graduation. Now imagine the camera doesn't cut. Imagine the timeline keeps moving. Fast forward 10 years. Stifler is now 28, then 32. He is doing the exact same things. He is using the same slang. He is drinking the same beer with the same ferocity. But something fundamental has shifted in the room. The laughter has changed frequency. It's no longer the laughter of shared rebellion. It's the nervous laughter of pity. Here is the uncomfortable question. What happens to the life of the party when the party moves on? We tend to think of maturity as a choice, something we decide to put on like a suit. But for the Stifler archetype, maturity feels like a surrender. If his entire value proposition was based on being the crazy one, who is he when crazy stops being a compliment and starts being a liability? We see this in our own lives. The friend who still treats every weekend like a conquest. At 18, it's legendary. At 30, it looks suspiciously like a coping mechanism. Why does the behavior that made him a god in the dorm room make him a pariah in the living room? Watch the eyes. That is where the shift happens. At 18, when Stifler enters a room, his eyes are predatory in a confident way. He scans the room to see who he can mess with, who is watching him. He knows the eyes are on him. He commands the space physically. He takes up room. He speaks slightly louder than necessary because he knows he will be heard. Now watch the same man at 30, performing the same routine. He enters the bar. He makes the loud joke. He insults a friend affectionately. But look at his eyes immediately after. He does a quick, frantic scan of the room. He is checking for validation. He is checking to see if the old magic still works. There is a micro-expression of panic when the joke lands in silence. You see it in the way he holds his drink, like a shield. At 18, the drink was a prop for fun. At 30, it's an anchor. He grips it tight. He laughs at his own jokes a split second before anyone else does, a subconscious cue begging others to join in. Notice the physical space. At 18, people gravitated toward him. At 30, you see a subtle physical recoil from the people around him. They take a half step back. They check their watches. They share brief, knowing glances with each other that exclude him. He senses this exclusion, and his reaction is to double down, to get louder, to become more Stifler. He thinks the problem is that he isn't broadcasting hard enough, when the reality is that the audience has turned off the receiver. It is easy to label this as immaturity or Peter Pan syndrome, but those are dismissive terms. If we look closer, what we are seeing is not a refusal to grow up, but a terrifying fear of disappearance. For a decade, this person built an identity entirely on external validation derived from chaos. Stifler is crazy, man. That was the label. That was the self. If he stops being crazy, does he cease to exist? Silence is the enemy of the Stifler archetype. Silence requires introspection. If the music stops, if the shouting matches end, he is left alone with his own thoughts in a quiet apartment. And for someone who has spent their entire adult life running on the fumes of adrenaline and social approval, that silence is deafening. It's not that he loves the party. It's that he is terrified of the hangover. Not the physical headache, but the existential void that opens up on Sunday afternoon. The Stifler persona is a armor against vulnerability. If you are always joking, nothing can hurt you. If you're always offensive, no one can get close enough to see that you are scared. At 30, the tragedy isn't that he is having fun. It's that he is working so hard to convince everyone else that he is having fun. It is labor. Being the party king at 32 is an exhausting full-time job with diminishing returns. He is carrying the corpse of his youth on his back, trying to animate it like a puppet, hoping no one notices the strings. This pattern isn't limited to fictional frat boys. It bleeds into professional environments, relationships, and family dynamics. Think of the office clown, the guy who treats the quarterly meeting like a stand-up set. In your early 20s, he's a relief. He breaks the tension. He mocks the boss. He's an ally against the system. But as you approach 30, that same behavior starts to read as incompetence. You want to finish the meeting and go home to your real life. He wants to extend the meeting because the office is his stage. Or the brutally honest friend. At 19, their lack of filter feels like refreshing authenticity. I just say it like it is, feels brave. By 30, you realize that brutal honesty without empathy is just cruelty wrapped in a marketing slogan. It destroys relationships. It alienates partners. We see it in the eternal traveler, who mocks anyone with a mortgage. At 22, living out of a backpack is a romantic adventure. At 35, if it's accompanied by a disdain for stability, it starts to look less like exploration and more like homelessness with a better Instagram filter. The common thread is a lack of evolution. Evolution requires shedding old skins. The Stifler archetype tries to wear the skin of an 18-year-old until it stretches and tears. They are trying to pay a mortgage with currency that was demonetized 10 years ago. They are playing a game where the rules changed, but they refuse to read the patch notes. There is no villain in this story. The friends who move on, who get married, have children, focus on their careers, are not boring or sellouts. They are simply adapting to the season of life they are in. They are building things that last. And Stifler is not a villain for wanting to hold on to the magic. There is a genuine beauty in the energy of youth. There is value in the ability to let go and be wild. The conflict arises not from malice, but from a misalignment of timelines. He feels betrayed. He looks at his friends and thinks, "You changed. You used to be fun." They feel pity. They look at him and think, "You haven't changed. You're still stuck." Both sides are mourning a loss. Stifler is mourning the loss of his audience. His friends are mourning the loss of the friend he could have become if he had allowed himself to evolve. It is a conflict of values, the value of novelty versus the value of continuity. Stifler chooses novelty every time, not realizing that without a foundation of continuity, novelty eventually becomes just noise. The breaking point rarely happens at the party. It happens in the spaces between. It happens on a Tuesday morning. Stifler wakes up. The room is messy, not in a cool aftermath way, but in a neglected hygiene way. His phone has no new notifications. The stories from the weekend have expired. He looks in the mirror. The face looking back is older. The lines are deeper. The frat boy haircut sits awkwardly on a 30-year-old forehead. For a brief moment, the performance drops. The exhaustion hits him. He realizes he is tired. He is tired of the noise. He is tired of the character. He wants to sit down. He wants to talk about something real. He wants to say, "I'm scared I'm falling behind." But then his phone buzzes. A notification, a memory, or a text from a 22-year-old who doesn't know better yet. And the mask slams back into place. "Let's go," he says to the empty room. But the voice is thinner now. The enthusiasm is hollow. He is an actor trapped in a long-running sitcom that everyone else has stopped watching. There is a scene in American Reunion that captures this perfectly. Stifler is working a temp job, miserable, trying to be an adult by someone else's definition. He fails. But his return to form isn't a triumph, it's a compromise. The truth that destroys you at 30 is this: you are not the main character of the world anymore. At 18, the world feels like a movie written for you. At 30, you realize you are part of an ensemble cast. Stifler's tragedy is his refusal to accept a supporting role. He demands the spotlight, unaware that the spotlight has moved to a different stage, one where being the wildest guy here is no longer the script. The party ends. The lights come on. The floor is sticky. The smell of stale beer is overwhelming. Most people leave. They grab their coats, call a cab, and go home to sleep. They wake up the next day and build something. Stifler stays. He is the guy wandering through the debris of the night, looking for one last drink, one last listener. He finds a half-empty cup. He raises it to the empty room. "To the Stiffmeister," he whispers. But there is no echo, just the hum of the refrigerator and the gray light of dawn creeping through the blinds. He drinks it alone.